Hey garage heads, here's the 2011 Ford Edge that has been added to the fleet of project vehicles here at the 6th Gear Garage. This one needs a bit of work, and I'm going to start with replacing the front brakes along with the calipers because one of them seized up and wore through the brake pad. So here are the tools I'll be using today. A floor jack, jack stands, a breaker bar, I have one that ratchets too, and an 11 and 12 millimeter ratcheting wrench, a 9 millimeter wrench for the bleeder valve, a 1/2 inch ratchet, as well as a 3/8 inch ratchet, a set of 3/8 inch sockets. I have a couple of 1/2 inch sockets, 19 and 17 millimeter, and a short 1/2 inch extension, and that's to use with the breaker bar, a big flathead for prying off the caliper, and another smaller 3/8 inch ratchet with a 10 millimeter socket, a torque wrench for tightening the lugs, and some brake fluid. And I have an impact wrench and ratchet to speed things up on the driver's side, but I'll be showing you the passenger side with just hand tools since not everyone has a compressor and air tools in their garage. First, set the park brake to lock the rear wheels. Then, use a 19 millimeter socket on the breaker bar to crack the lug nuts loose. Then jack up the vehicle and support it with jack stands. Now, I can remove the lug nuts by hand and take off the wheel. With the wheel off, I can see that the outside pad has plenty of life left. Now, the inside pad is completely done. There's no pad material left. The caliper is supposed to apply even pressure to both sides, but over time, they wear out or don't have enough grease inside to lubricate them. That causes one pad to do more of the braking, and it's usually the inside one that you can't see. These are the original calipers with 165,000 miles, so they had a good run. Here's the new caliper. I got new brake pads as well, and a caliper for the driver's side too, because you should replace both sides together. If one side is going bad, chances are the other side isn't too far behind. This is the caliper, and this bracket is a separate piece. When I unbolt the caliper from the bracket, it's only going to be attached by this brake line, and I don't want a heavy caliper hanging on the rubber line. So I'll set it on here to keep the stress off the line. Now, if I take this bolt out here, I'll get some extra slack so I can set it aside on this flower pot. I'm sure it's rusty, being in Ohio. I'll give it a little lube and let it soak. When I try and loosen a 10 millimeter bolt, it's bending the whole bracket because the bolt's seized. Typical Ohio stuff here. I'll just put some vice grips on that square nut on the back. There we go. With the bolt removed, I could just pull the brake line right out of the bracket. Before I take off the caliper, now's the ideal time to crack the banjo bolt loose. Just a little bit. While it's bolted down to the bracket, I can get good leverage to crack it loose if it's seized or really tight, compared to if it's not attached to anything. And this bolt is 12 millimeters. That's good. Now I'll just tighten it back up a little. There's a 17 millimeter bolt up here and one down here. They're kind of tight. This breaker bar makes it easier to get them started. Once they're started, I remove them a lot faster with a ratchet. These are the pins that let the caliper slide to apply even braking pressure on both sides of the rotor. This one's stuck. The grease on these degrades over time and the caliper doesn't slide like it should. When you're putting these back in, the bigger bolt goes in the top. Now the caliper comes off with the help of a screwdriver. And I'll just set it aside for now. That extra slack really helped. So here we have the shim that went on the back of the inner brake pad. Now you can really see the amount of pad on the inside versus the outside. Now I can unbolt the bracket from the hub. The bracket bolts are both 19 millimeter. With those out, the bracket is now free. And now the rotor can be removed too. While I'm in here doing this, it's a great time to get a close look at the CV boots and the ball joint, just to make sure None of these rubber parts are torn and losing their grease. Tie rod in link too. All good here. Important note, left and right calipers are different. If you get your new calipers mixed up, the bleeder valve always has to go at the top to allow the air to escape when bleeding. So this one is for the passenger side. Here's the driver's side. It won't bleed correctly if it's on the passenger side. First, I need to separate the new caliper from the bracket. Set the pins somewhere clean so dirt doesn't get on them. You'll notice there's grease on the new pins, or at least there should be. I like to add a little more for good measure, just to be sure these pins stay well lubed. You never know how much grease they put on them when they remanufacture these calipers. I'll put some on the other pin too. The new caliper should have included these clips. They go on the bracket, in between the bracket and the brake pads. They just press into place, like that. Here's a better look. Sometimes they don't snap right in, and you have to force them in. Then do the same on the other side of the bracket. And these clips are where brake pads will sit nice and snug. Before I load up this bracket, I'm putting a little brake lube where the brake pad tabs go. That helps them slide in easy and prevent corrosion where they contact. Then place the pad in the clips and repeat for the other side. Now the bracket is loaded and ready to be installed. Before I put the loaded bracket on the hub, let's swap over the caliper. This is called the banjo bolt, and notice there are two copper washers. The steel brake line fitting can only go between these two washers. The washers slightly crush when I tighten this bolt up, and that helps create a tighter seal. So I'll have the bolt and outer washer ready to go like this. The inner washer I'll place between the brake line fitting and the caliper. I'm going to try and do this as fast as possible. The more time I spend with an open brake line, the more brake fluid will come out. That means more air in the brake line, which means more bleeding the brakes when this is all done. I cracked this 12mm banjo bolt loose earlier, so it's easy to loosen now. It's about to come out. Ready, set, go. New bolt and copper washer on. And the other copper washer. Wait a minute, I twisted the line up. Meanwhile, I'm losing brake fluid. Alright, I'm good. I just need to tighten the banjo bolt down. So the new banjo bolt is 11mm instead of 12mm like the original one was. The banjo bolt gets torqued to 18 foot-pounds. I'm putting on the rotor, and now the loaded bracket. If you're using new rotors, spray them down with brake cleaner first to remove the factory oil coating. Now I'm tightening the 19mm bracket bolts. And these get torqued down to 98 foot-pounds. Next, I'm pulling both of the pins out, being sure to keep them clean. And once those are out of the way, I can install the caliper. And the new caliper just slides over the brake pads like that. If you're reusing an old caliper, you'll need to compress the pistons back in with a clamp first to accommodate for the new, thicker brake pads. Slide the top pin in. Remember, the top one is longer, and the bottom one. These are 17mm, and I'm just hand tightening them with the socket for now to get them snug. Then they both get torqued to 65 foot-pounds. Don't forget about this guy here, the 10mm bolt that holds the brake line, 20 foot-pounds. The passenger side is done. New brake parts look so good, don't they? I'll put a link in the description to another video where I show how to prep, prime, and paint new brake parts, if you're interested in having them look good for the long run. After both the driver and passenger side are done, it's time to bleed the brakes. Have someone go in the car and press the brake pedal and hold it. Then get a container under the caliper and crack open the bleeder valve with a 9mm wrench. This lets air out of the line. Then close the valve and release the brake pedal. Repeat the whole process over and over until all the air is out of the brake lines. Periodically stop and top off the brake fluid reservoir so it doesn't run low and pump more air into the system. The bleeder valve only gets 8 foot-pounds, and don't forget to put the rubber cap on the bleeder valve. Now I can reinstall the wheels and let the car back down onto the ground. Be sure to retorque the lugs to the factory spec of 100 foot-pounds. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and consider subscribing for more how-to videos and project vehicle updates here at the 6th Gear Garage.